Good evening, everyone in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, July 17th, 2024, and I'm Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an evening of solutions for a new Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. APP's purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect their prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and self-determination by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship within or without Canada. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do this without your help. If this is your first time watching, welcome. And I hope you find this information engaging and wanting to find out more. And if you're a regular APP webinar viewer, thank you for your support. If you can, please share this webinar. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Rumble, as well as after this live, we're also on other video and audio sites like Apple, Spotify, BitChute, and Vimeo under the Alberta Prosperity Project banner, as well as the Chris and Kerry Show. Tonight, APP, I'm going to show the website here just for a second. APP's website has a goal of membership driven with a goal of 1 million plus members to help steer the political process. You can find out more by going to albertaprosperityproject.com. APP memberships are 1 year for $20, 2 years for $30, 3 years for $40, or you can make a donation at albertaprosperityproject.com. We are also supporting or talking about our Support 5 initiative. If you go on the website and you go under Support 5, it then tells you that we are looking for 5 minutes a week on social media, liking, sharing, and commenting on our posts, recruiting 5 new supporters monthly. And of course, that grows our community strength and reach and network, and a $5 monthly donation if you're able to do that to fuel our initiatives, empowering us to plan effectively and push forward towards our goals. We do have an events page on here as well. And I'll just jump back to that. Go down to the events page, upcoming events. It is summer, and wow, what a nice day. I'm not sure where you are in Alberta, but it's definitely 30 degrees here in Calgary, and it's great. And you kind of get wrapped up in the summer, and you forget about everything else that's happening. I know there was a town hall that happened in Ponoka yesterday where our former CEO, Chris Scott, was speaking, and they did it outside. So there's no reason why you actually have to be inside for an event, but you can always find out more at the events page and find out which chapters are doing such and such. We are doing a door knocking initiative as well. You can find out more about that by just contacting us at contact@albertaprosperity.com. Of course, I'm also involved in the Alberta Pension Plan, and I'm going to just jump to that page here, which is the Alberta First Pension Plan. And you can go to albertafirstpension.ca. We are no longer doing events. We wrap them up in June, but we are doing online town halls every second Tuesday, and they are broadcast right on the website, albertafirstpension.ca, so you don't even have to go hunting for us. They are also on Facebook and X and the such. Last week, we actually had a weekly challenge, and that challenge was to raise $2,000 by $5 donations. And guess what? We raised $2,400, and that $2,400 goes towards a lot of infrastructure stuff, a lot of website, printing out cards to hand out. We were actually doing handout cards at the Calgary Stampede breakfasts, and we did that last week. And of course, we're now ramping up to do a bunch of these other online webinars as well as events. We're going to be touring across the province as Alberta Prosperity Project, as well as Alberta First Pension, and we're going to be doing that come September. So if you are interested in any of that, you can get a hold of us also at contact@albertaprosperity.com. And if you want to know more about any other events, our good friend Max has created the calendar at freedomcalendar.net. I feel like I'm just nothing but a guy talking about all the events that could be happening, pointing you to websites. But you know what? People ask me that all the time. Whenever we're out in an event, where can I find out more? How can I get involved? Here it is. Here's the plan. I'm going to just cut this little piece, paste it up there so you guys don't even have to listen to this anymore. You know exactly where to go. Alberta Prosperity Project, Alberta First Pension, freedomcalendar.net. Those, of course, the ones that we're doing right now. I'm also involved in another group. I am Albertan, and I'll be talking more about that. We're going to end up having guests on talking about that initiative as well, just because there is a lot of politics going on in the world. Of course, we're going to be talking tonight about that. but it's also nice to know what being a real Albertan is all about. And I'm excited about the I Am Albertan initiative, and we'll be getting to that very soon. Tonight's episode is called A Better Alberta, and that's named after a new municipal party that was announced called a Better Calgary Party. And we have Roy Baer, who is the executive director of Project YYC, who is the organization that led to the process of creating that party. He was also involved in the Recall Gondek group to recall the Calgary mayor, as well as to stop blanket rezoning in Calgary. He's been on quite a few of our webinars already. He was on in February of this year talking about the anniversary of the Emergencies Act, and he was on in October 2023 discussing the UCP annual general meeting, and as well as in August of last year talking about his group Taking Back Our Freedom and his mission to bring unity, truth, and justice back to Canada. And this is a live webinar, unless you're watching it not live. But if you're watching it right now, this is a live webinar. So if you'd like to make comments or ask questions, please put 3 question marks before your question so I can flag it and we can try to answer it after. And once again, please share, share, and share. And with that, I'm now going to bring on Mr. Roy Baer. Roy, how are you?
Hey, Kerry, I'm doing really, really good. Thanks for having me tonight again.
Thank you so much for coming out and talking with us. You know, I see you at all the events. I'm at the same events you are.
Yeah.
Or maybe you were just
different organizations working together, which is very key. It's very, very important.
You're probably at more events that I just happen to see you at.
Yeah. Well, especially the last 2 weeks with the Calgary Stampede. You know, I'm not much of a Calgary Stampede person, except for this year, because of my involvement with this Project YYC. And I had no idea that there was so many political type meetings, like barbecues, breakfasts, lunches, all the rest of it. The networking was fantastic. It was just really, really fantastic to connect with people who are sort of arch rivals in the political arena and start building some bridges of understanding. So, and it's a lot of fun too. So, yeah, it's the first time Calgary wasn't rained on during the Stampede that I know of.
No, it rained just like the very first day or whatever, and then that was it. And so it was gorgeous. You know, the event seemed to be to take off, and the attendance again, records.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic to see the crowds back after the nonsense of the last 3 years, right? So. Nothing made me so angry as to what happened with the whole COVID mandates and stuff like that. And it's nice to see there's some normalcy, but it's also important to remember that a lot of the forces that brought that about are still there, and we still have to work vigilantly to make sure that does not happen again. So that's really what I'm doing. I mean, with Project YYC, I know this is broadcast to all Alberta, but I want to encourage everybody to know this. Winning in Calgary is important for all of Alberta, right? Here in this city of Calgary, we've had now 4 in a row, hard leftist mayors, like not sort of leftist, hard left, woke, crazy mayors in the city of Calgary. And it affects the kind of the culture of the city. So it moves all of the mindset to the left. Yeah. And in the last provincial election, we came within less than 3,000 votes of having Rachel Notley as our mayor. And I'm talking about 3,000 votes in Calgary. There were so many very close ridings. We could have had 54 seats, and we ended up with 48. It was so many close races. And when we went through that, and I mean, I was a campaign manager for Eric Bouchard there in Calgary-Lougheed, and we won very handily there. But watching the rest of the city, we just sat there and said, we have to change the culture of this city, the political climate or culture of this city. And so we started Project YYC almost right after the election of last spring, not this last spring, but the spring before the provincial election. And so, and we're well on our way in implementing a plan to take back Calgary. So it's very exciting.
So with Project YYC, you had a couple of initiatives. Do you want to maybe just discuss what you guys were doing, even in terms of the recall Gondek for sure, and then the blanket rezoning, of course. I have some other notes that I was going to ask.
We had some plans. I mean, basically, the ultimate goal is to win back Calgary at the city council level, because we believe by doing that, we'd also position us to have a much stronger victory in the next provincial election, hopefully with a lot of the right type of candidates like the Eric Bouchards. We want to recruit lots of those type of candidates and elect them right here in the city of Calgary. Eric is tremendously popular with Calgarians, believe it or not. Yes, okay, he did this injection of truth thing, and we're told as Calgarians, don't do that controversial stuff. It's exactly the opposite. People appreciate honesty and common sense. So we decided we need to elect a much more suitable city council. And so we had a plan. And the first step in that plan was to do a recall of Gondek. Even though we knew that it was almost impossible to achieve the numbers, we were planning to do that in the spring of this year. And what happened is a person named Landon Johnson, who nobody knew, out of the blue, decided to launch this recall, right? So, and Project YYC, we thought about it for about 24 hours, and we thought, okay, it's important for us to help him, even though he had no plan, no resources, nothing. He had nothing. We were going to start with 1,000 volunteers. He started with 0, but we jumped in to help him. And even though the numbers didn't come in fantastic, it was less than 100,000 people on our petition. The fact is, it weakened the mayor tremendously. I mean, her popularity went from the record low of any mayor in the history of Calgary to even 5 points lower than that, right? So it's very unlikely she's going to run again. If she does, it's very unlikely she can win. And that's part of the process, is to weaken the existing leaders, try to push them out. And then as you do that, find good leaders to replace them. So our goal was to do the recall project anyway, and we did.
Just for our viewers to know too. So Landon decided to run with this on his own. Well, good for him for at least having that initiative, but he didn't talk to anybody to find out that there was another group all doing this. And so he started the ball rolling. He needed so many signatures within such a finite amount of time. Why couldn't you just
500,000 signatures in
90 days? 60 days. So why couldn't he have just done his own and then you guys did your own after?
Because the legislation allows only one single petition per election cycle. So you have to wait a certain period of time after an election to do the petition, and you can't do one within a year of the next election. So there's a narrow window of time and only one opportunity. We had no other choice, and I'm really glad we did, because we put together a fantastic team of really good volunteers. And serendipity, or providence, or maybe God, whatever you want to believe here. On the heels of that, the city of Calgary had this rezoning of the entire city, blanket rezoning, which I call it blanket BS, because what they're doing is they're banning, and essentially they're doing away with the notion of a single unit type housing, right? So
whoops, did we lose you? Maybe too much bandwidth. we actually had a little. Oh, there he is. Let's bring him back on.
Yeah,
we're just saying I'm using too much bandwidth showing this this web page, but I just wanted to show, there was a lot of effort put into.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Let people see that picture. Let's see. Let people see that picture. So you're talking about a residential neighborhood, single family neighborhood, where everybody has a single family. Maybe the odd person might have a basement suite. And what they're doing now is rezoning, so you can have as many as 8 units with 8 basement suites on a single lot, right? Now that's an extreme example, but there's 4 typically that do is 4 and 4 with only half the parking as what you have units.
Yeah.
So if you've got 8 units, including the basement suites, you only have to provide 4 parking spots. And of course, that means everybody parks on the streets.
Yeah.
And you understand the real agenda. Like Trudeau said this past week, that he's the cause of the housing. And listen very carefully, because the guy's an idiot, but it's very revealing. The cause of the housing crisis in Canada is not 1.3 million immigrants coming into Canada in 1 year. No. It's because people want to live in a big house.
Yeah.
And he mentioned boomers specifically. And it's like, we have the second largest landmass of any country in the world. We have the largest supply of fresh water of any city in the world. They create shortages on purpose to force us into this bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? That's exactly what's going on. So
you jumped right into the water. I knew we would be talking about it.
I had to jump into the water because I live like 200 yards away from the Bow River. It's flowing high.
Yes.
They still won't let us water our gardens in our city.
Yeah.
And this mayor is on every level dark and evil and needs to be removed. And so, so Project YYC, what we ran into, we took the volunteer base from our recall, put him into the stop the rezoning.
Yeah.
And over 5,000 people submitted written submissions to City Council, and over I think it was just short of 1,000 came in person presentations. That's very intimidating to do that. But just to get perspective, that's almost 3 times bigger than any hearing in the city of Calgary, with over 75% expressing opposition to blanket rezoning, and City Council gave us the middle finger and decided they're going to do it anyway. Right? So of course, Project YYC is all about making sure this council pays a political price. Jason Kenney paid a political price, and we'll make absolutely sure that this City Council, the hateful 8, we call them, that voted for this, and Gondak, we got to get rid of them. And so that's really what this new political party in Calgary is all about. Project YYC, our next step is to help form that political party.
Okay. And you called it a Better Calgary Party. And you just had your I guess your inaugural launch just a couple of weeks ago. And you had quite a number of people that came out to that. You want to just explain a little bit about that too? Yeah,
we made it invitation only. So we just invited influencers because we wanted to make sure that some of the incumbent City Council members who are good, there's not many, but there's a few, as they observe who we are and what we're all about, that they're open to the idea of working with us, because it's very challenging as we go from no political party for Calgary. Now we have a political party. It's specific only to Calgary, and there's going to be 1 or 2 more, and it's going to be good. It's going to be very good, but it's hard for the incumbent to go from a no political party scenario to a political party scenario, right? So our goal was to have a successful event with a good number of people there, of influencers, and we did that, right? And we had a follow-up rodeo event. It was an interesting event because I could talk about that. You were there as well. We had a big barbecue event in one of the parks here in Calgary, and we had about 400 pounds of food and about a nice sound system that we had to transport 1 kilometer from the parking lot to where there is a really nice picnic area for 300 people. And the city of Calgary would not give us access by a vehicle to the site. So we had to haul by hand 400 pounds of food in the sound system. And it was frustrating, but again,
I couldn't believe it. Yeah. And it's by
like the laws,
so after the flood, just so people have an idea of where it is in Calgary. So in 2013, we had a flood and it washed away a lot of the trees and some of the park area there. And so they decided that this would be their opportunity to recreate this park. So they did. So they basically, instead of having a giant ring road around the park, for lack of a better word, they decided just to build parking lots. So the parking lots are on one side and then the green spaces on the other. Again, looking at it sounds logical, as most things that we seem to talk about on the Alberta Prosperity Project webinars sound great until they're actually implemented, right?
Yeah.
And so now in that particular case, can you imagine if it was a cold or rainy or just a terrible day and you had to haul that stuff on, and like you couldn't even get a permit to drive a truck in. They wouldn't let you do it. You look at this, the way that park is laid out, they have outhouses that are literally right next door to the washrooms.
Yeah.
So I mean, they should have spread that out. Like there's so many little things living in Calgary that I've become more and more aware of like, I shake my head on a lot of this stuff. And it's amazing how many times I go out to diners and little cafes, and you see the group of old men, which we are now in that group. Despite the fact that
we're upper middle age.
We would be sitting at those tables complaining. But that I've actually approached a few people and said, so you guys are complaining. I like the ideas. Are you guys doing anything about it? Well, no. What can we do? Right. And it's like, here's a perfect example. If you don't like for me, it was the province, and I saw issues dealing with AHS and those sorts of things. So that's why I became involved in this. And you've been everywhere, Roy. Yeah. I mean, you went out to Ottawa with us. You did your Taking Back Our Freedom. And you're involved in municipalities. And I think that's in Calgary, that's what we need. We need people to step up and realize that there are issues, and how do we solve those issues? And it's just to get a group together and actually try and do something about it.
Yeah, and I think I want to say this to all the freedom-minded people listening in on this or listening anywhere down the road. We need every freedom-minded people to resolve to become a leader. Okay.
Yeah.
We need more leaders, and so, for example, we need. There's 83 constituency associations of the UC Party. There's 30 positions, board positions in each one of those. Do the math, right? You might say, "I've never done that. I'm not interested." Good people are typically not interested in politics. Okay, so and that's why we have such a mess, because
busy people.
It draws all the wrong people.
Yeah.
Unless you decide you're going to be a leader and you're going to do this for all the right reasons. I think of Trump, who got shot this last few days. The guy steps right back into it and just says, now that's an example of a person that's a billionaire. He doesn't need to do any of this. He's doing it for all the right reasons. I don't care about his personality, whether you like it or don't like it. He's a person that's stepping up for the right reasons. So we need thousands of freedom-minded people to step up as leaders. And in Calgary, we're forming this political party, and Project YYC is involved with helping make sure that happens and it's successful. And there's a huge opportunity for leaders to step up. And it's not nearly as hard as you think. It's going to be just a willingness to do a few things volunteer-wise, but also to have a voice. And in that voice, you can make a huge difference.
So this idea of municipality or municipal parties, has this been done elsewhere?
Well, yes and no. Because it's experimented in Quebec for a long time. I don't know why Quebecers come up with so many good ideas, like independence, their own tax, their own pension, everything, right? Their own police. So I always think, okay, Quebec. Oftentimes because they'd like to look after themselves, and that's at least that's something as Albertans we should be able to relate to. We look after ourselves. We don't have to let the big government look after our pension. We can look after ourselves. Sorry, we don't need RCMP. We can look after ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I diverted from the question. I can't remember, but. So Quebec came up with the idea of municipality parties, right?
Yes. Okay.
But I say sort of, because how it works is somebody decides they want to be a mayor, they come up with a name for their party, and then they pick the other ward members that they want, council members, and then they run as a slate, right?
Okay.
And I That's not Alberta. You can do that in Quebec. In Alberta, ordinary people need a voice. Regular folks need a voice. I hear it from the elite all the time. Well, what if, they're not that smart? What if this organization, that organization takes over the party, whatever? I said, well, if you can't bring people to the party, then you have a problem, right? So all of us need to bring people. And the fact is, grassroots, or whatever you want to call it, is big changes always happen when ordinary people get involved for the right reason. And that's what we're asking people to do here. So we're going to select our council, our nominees. Okay, so it's a nomination process. So there's 14 wards in Calgary. So let's say you're in Ward 7. It's a lucky number. I live in Ward 7. So I'm in Ward 7. Yeah. And there's, typically there's 2 or 3 good guys running, and then there's one leftist running, because the unions have been doing this for years. They pick a person, public sector unions, under the name of Calgary Futures Calgary, or Calgary's Future. They're TPA, a third party advertiser. They raised $1.7 million to elect the mayor and their council. And they picked one person for each ward, right? You could do the math here, how good this is. And one person as a mayoral candidate. We, conservatives, moderates, business-minded, ordinary Calgarians, we have 2 or 3 good people running against each other. In the last election, we had 29 mayoral candidates, 29.
Yeah, that was
and the unions had 1. And guess who won? Right?
That one.
So they did that with Nancy 3 in a row. Yeah. They did that with Gondak. So the only way on the conservative side, because we don't cheat. So on the left, they run it like a political party. There's no legislation to say you have to have a political party or you can't have a political party, but they did it anyway, right? So they just do it because that's the practical thing to do. We on the right, well, we just need to have the rules laid out. And so Daniel Smith created legislation in Bill 20 to allow Calgary and Edmonton have political parties. And that allows us to narrow the field from many to 1, right? In Ward 7, we need 1 good centrist conservative or centrist right kind of person that has business sense, that's qualified, some charisma, right? And that person runs against whatever the unions put up. Then we have a fighting chance. Calgary should never have the kind of council that we've had the last 4 elections in a row. We should have, we're a city of opportunity, of entrepreneurship, oil and gas, the rodeo, the Wild West, all that stuff. That's deeply in our culture, and yet we allow these woke leftist Trudeauites to run our city. And that's a mess. And we're going to work hard to fix it, but we need everybody's help to do that.
So does this fall under Elections Alberta? Again, because I'm more provincial, so I'm thinking, is there a governing body that kind of looks and sees, how many donors there are? Is there a maximum per donor? And the reason I'm bringing that particular portion up is because we've just gone through a few municipal elections. Chestermere just had a municipal election, right? And we were talking with a group of people there, and it seemed to be they didn't have the same restrictions that they do in Alberta in terms of the amount of money that you can put towards a campaign. So with me, when I was running as an MLA, we had certain amount of money that we could only put towards signs, or we could only ask for donations up to $4,600, whatever it was per person could donate to our campaign. And I'm just thinking, the more money you have, if you're an individual, it's almost like the more it can be a popularity contest. The more your name is out there, the more it's recognizable. And then you could actually just get in, whether you're leftist or not. It just seems to come down to money. How does the Better Calgary Party, how would you deal with that? Is there rules for that?
Very good question. And the answer is yes. Under the Municipal Act as it is, So almost no rules. And you're exactly right. A person with the big bucks, it's usually union money or developer money. Okay, so developers are running their candidates, unions are running their candidates, and really, I mean, if I have to choose, I'll probably choose the developer. But neither one is really representing the people of the city, whether it's Cochrane or Chestermere. The mess in both those cities, is just unbelievable. And it's under the Municipal Act. There's huge problems. So Bill 20 is a first step to resolve some of those problems. And in Calgary and Edmonton, we have the right to set up a political party. Political party will have certain advantages in terms of raising money, but there's also transparency requirements in terms of who the donors are and limitations, that kind of thing. For anyone donating to any candidate, it's going to be a $5,000 limitation, which will make it more difficult for the public sector union to throw up $1.7 million towards electing their slate.
Yeah.
But we still have to do the hard work, right? So the money, there's rules around it, which is more similar to what you had as running for to be an MLA. And it's going to be similar to that for the city of Calgary.
Okay. Well, that does help, I guess, in terms of, if you're looking for a party and you agree with those parties, the policies, then it does make sense that you would vote for that particular candidate. Now, do you have any candidates that are currently on the slate for a Better Calgary? Like, what's the process for that?
Yeah, that's the election is a year and 3 months from now. So we're at the stage where by the end of this month, we'll have a formalized process by which a person can launch to become a nominee, right? So in Ward 7, if somebody wants to run to be nominated as representing a Better Calgary in Ward 7, they can start in August to sell memberships and that kind of thing and build up their support base, right? And by the end of November, we'll actually have town hall meetings where you hear from the 4 or 5 candidates, debates, speeches, that kind of thing, and we'll choose our favorite, right? So that's kind of the process, very similar to how it works for the UCP party or NDP party or other big parties. They have a nomination process. If you win the nomination, then the party backs you to help you get elected. The advantage of a party backing you, if you think about it, when you voted for the last provincial election, most people voted either for Rachel Notley, God forbid, but anyway, or for Daniel Smith.
Not even knowing who in that case, the MLA candidates.
Yeah, you think, oh yeah, there's this person or that person is the representative for the UCP party. So you put your check mark beside that name. So the brand becomes the attraction. And behind that brand are policies or principles, right? So and what we did as a party, you go to our website, we created 10 fundamental principles of the party, right? So this is the stuff we believe in. And you cannot be a member of our party unless you agree to the principles. You cannot be a nominee or a candidate unless you agree to the principles. And people say, well, why don't you have the word conservative in your name? Because the name conservative scares a lot of people, especially in the big cities. They've been brainwashed. They think something about what it means to be conservative. So we came up with a name that we know doesn't scare people away. Okay. And it's the principles that are important. And the cool thing about conservative principles, if you just articulate the principles, most people say yes to that. Most Albertans say yes to all 10 of the items we have written down. But they're actually conservative principles, right? And so, the first one is that municipal issues are decided by those who are local, right? So what that means is that it's the idea that you're governed in terms of as much as possible by people who are closest to you. So federally, it's important for us to have a federal government that looks after our borders. So it makes sense that that's what the federal government does.
Yeah.
Municipally, on the other hand, what they need to do is look after our infrastructure, our water delivery system, our road system, road ice removal, and the basics of running a city are very, very important, right? So that's our first principle. We'll focus on core municipal priorities and essential services. No more woke nonsense crap. This all of the stuff, the money that's spent, the time, the energy, the $87 billion budget for a fake climate change emergency, right? Just think about how much money gets wasted. Meanwhile, they should have inspected this water line in Calgary at least every couple of years. They haven't inspected for at least 10 years. And they just let it go to crap because it's not important. What's important is bike lanes, No, it's not. It's the other way around. So fiscal responsibility, right? At the same time with compassion. Do you know conservatives are actually far more compassionate than leftists?
Yeah.
Way more, right? I've read so much in terms of stats, data, information that conservatives actually care about people. Like Daniel Smith's solution to the addicts is to help them get off drugs, where in BC with the leftists, it's to help them to stay on drugs.
And we saw what happened over there too.
They create so much destruction and death in the lives of people. There's not an ounce of compassion behind the leftist agenda. Yeah. So again, when you say it in words, then people read it. Oh, is that what it means to be conservative? Yes, we will be transparent, accountable, and accessible to all. We'll ensure the municipal issues are decided at the most local level possible. So, for example, in most cities, big cities, there's community associations. And if somebody wants to build a big, ugly building in their community, they have to go and apply for a building permit. Yeah. I used to be in the development industry. I know how that works. And if it's big, ugly, guess what happens? The community says no, and no means no.
But again, the community only will say no if they know about it, which they do. They're told they have to post it in high visibility, 90-day or whatever the amount of time it is. But people still need to be involved. And I think that's the big driving factor of everything that we've learned over the last 10, 20 years is that people have just not been involved. And so if this is one way that people can get involved and actually do something about their city, then I would, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with this party idea, especially in municipal politics.
Yeah, and I'd just like to speak to a couple of these principles. One or two more. Yes. Just environmental stewardship, right? Again, the whole idea that carbon dioxide is a toxin is such nonsense. It's so stupid. You can't believe so many smart people can't think their way through that garbage. They just seem like, if they're told by CBC, CTV, and Global all the same thing, it must be true. And they don't understand it's just pure propaganda being fed, right? So then we who criticize this CO2 agenda and the carbon tax and everything else, we're told that we don't care about the environment. Exactly the opposite. Albertans are stewards of the environment more so than any other province in Canada, by far. They, just as an example, Kerry, because I did a lot of study of history of Calgary. I was a good friend of Link Byfield and Ted Byfield, and they wrote this huge encyclopedia about the history of Alberta. And I've come to love Alberta. I'm just very proud of this province. And one of the things I discovered is that Alberta has contributed more square miles to the national park system of Canada than all other provinces combined.
That I didn't know.
And if you stop and think about it, every Albertan, number one, should know that. In fact, every Canadian should know that. Because every time somebody from the East opens their flapping mouth and says, you guys, you're destroying the climate with your oil and gas industry, it's just BS. We should be able to immediately push back and say, you know what, when you match our commitment to the environment, you can talk. In the meantime, we're both prospering and looking after our stuff at the same time. So so conservatives, more so than, I know you can still hear me. I know you can't see me.
Yep, I can. Yeah, I can hear you.
I don't know. My camera just turns off every once in a while. We need to be familiar with our history so that we're proud of our history as Albertans. And we need to be aware of the fact that we're hardworking people to look after our land more so than any other part of Canada. And no one has anything to say to us about the environment. No one in this country, right? So,
and you did talk about when you're talking to the individual, you're talking to when I was door knocking as an example. If you have one-on-one conversations, a large percentage, and it could even be as high as 90%, will totally agree with you without even bringing up a whole bunch of other ideas, right? And but what I find is that when we're talking about stewardship, we're talking about that. Everyone agrees, but it's not just the individuals that have any say in this. We have government that are granting billions of dollars for money so that they can put CO2 in the ground, right? And they're looking at all these projects, and so it's not just the individuals that need to be shouting louder. It's these big government big corporations that are taking that money to do these jobs, to put the CO2 in the ground. And that's just one example. They should be saying, you know what, thanks for the money, but this is hogwash. We're not having any of that. But the money is too much. It's there. And that's the problem, is that people are just looking at it from a money point of view.
Yeah, and it's the sad reality is that the big oil companies decided to go along with the same thing, and so it's hard for a politician to say it's nonsense when even the big oil companies went along. But I think more and more people are putting two and two together, right? They're realizing, carbon dioxide is not a toxin and any more than H2O. It's the same thing. Too much of H2O causes a flood, and too much of CO2, I guess, in theory, could cause something. But the reality is
more green plants.
Right now, the world is getting much greener because of the higher levels of CO2. Yeah. Number one, we know that. We not think that. And no, there's no connection between global warming and CO2 and all the rest of it. So the challenge for us as conservatives is to remind everyone that we do look after our environment. We have a history of looking after our environment, and so we don't need a climate change emergency to prove nothing, right? So we really blanket rezoning. When you look at what happens to all the trees on a house lot that gets bought and then gets
that's right. You're right.
All the trees are gone, and there's no room for any trees.
I've got big trees in my backyard, and if they wanted to just plow down my lot and put up an 8-story or 8 complex, there goes my trees.
It takes, by the time you get the house, the parking, and everything built for that unit or those units, there's no. They always, on the artist rendition, they have these little trees that are growing on the front, right? But it's 2 feet away from the house, so you know what a tree does when it starts to grow. Like, that tree's coming down very soon. So there's no green agenda attached to these leftists. There's no notion of family or local governance or the voice of the people with these leftists. So everything that's Albertan, okay, our love of the environment, our love of the opportunity that we have. That's why people move here. People move to Calgary because they love the fact that they can own a house with a lot with trees. Yeah. Not just white people. I'm talking about people of every race come to Calgary. They love Calgary because of opportunity and close to the mountains. I get to own a house and I get to have a backyard. So these leftists will literally say that our zoning rules that only have these single family subdivisions is racist. They literally say that. And it's nonsense, right? It's lies. And if people don't think their way through these lies, right? So go to your neighbor who's East Indian or Chinese and who lives in a single family house and ask them why they came to Calgary. They say because I can live in this house, I can afford to live a house, and because of the environment and because it's opportunity, I can make money, I can prosper. These are all things that are Calgary, right, and Alberta, and we welcome people from all over the country, and we have a crazy mayor and this hateful eight council that is, I just, they want to take everything beautiful out of our lives, everything beautiful out of our lives, everything that brings peace and brings, just a sense of contentment to us. They want to disrupt all of that, right? So, and I'm not overstating it. I mean, I can see this water line, the timing of it. If this was an oil pipeline run by an oil pipe, and I've talked to so many oil companies, it'd be fixed in 24 hours. It's like,
I agree.
It takes weeks and weeks and weeks. And even now I can't water my garden. I do, but technically I'm not allowed, right? So it's
well, and it's interesting that you say that too, because and again, this is live and we're just talking off the cuff, but I think it's important to have these conversations. Our neighbors out there watering, and they look back at you and are you going to report on me? No, I'm not going to report on you. Right? It's like, no, I like, it's been dry now for a week. We'd get a little bit of rain every now and then. My grass looks like absolute hell right now, but there's only so much I can possibly do, but my flowers are doing okay. So I'm happy with that. But at a point, there's going to be a situation where it's like, okay, so what do we do? What do we do as a neighbor, a neighborhood? What do we do as a community? What do we do as a city to say, you know what, this is ridiculous. They're just getting us ready for the next big issue that's going to end up coming. Who knows? Next year there may not be the water rationing. We'll only be able to water every second day, or maybe my neighborhood will only be able to water on a Tuesday. Well, if it rains on a Tuesday, well, then that's great, because then I don't have to water. But what about the people that have to water?
It's crazy. I mean, my dad always told a story. He was in Germany as a young boy, and they attended a Baptist church. So it was, a relatively small circle of people that they thought were friends you can trust. So my grandfather, Hans, he was anti-Hitler, and he expressed that opinion within the church. He did, he didn't say it publicly, but in the church. And the mayor of the city was a good friend of my grandfather, Hans, and phoned Hans up and said, "I need to talk to you." So Hans went over to the mayor's office, and Hans was told by the mayor, he said, "You think the people in your church are your friends. They have reported to the SS your comments about Hitler." And so as a young boy hearing these stories, I'm very, very aware of how totalitarianism slips into our culture. The idea now with this emergency, a neighbor can phone in a neighbor, anonymous report, and all that stuff. It's just conditioning us to something much worse than what COVID was, unless we collectively say no. You replace this mayor in Calgary, we win Alberta in the next election, but we also stop the wickedness that's going on here, right? So we need just an army of people, and we need to grow that army, and we need people. So I said at the very beginning, every freedom-minded person step up as a leader. And even if you've never led anything before, like Eric Bouchard, he's the MLA there in Calgary Lougheed. When I told him, I think you should run to be an MLA, he just thought I was nuts. He really thought I was nuts. He said, "I would never do that. I hate politicians. I hate politics." I said, "That's why you need to do this."
Yeah, it's true.
You are the right person, because he lost his business to the mandates. He was still looking for what to do next. And I said, "You're exactly the right person to step in." There's a lot of people listening to this program, Kerry, that I believe are that person. You hate politics. You are the right person to step in.
Yeah,
right. And we need tons of people that are just going to step up, because yes, there's a lot of nastiness that gets drawn to politics. Like you turn on the light at night and the bugs, the flies, everything else. That's, the analogy. We just need to be we just need to not be afraid of that and be stronger than that, right? So, yeah.
No. We've got a few questions. Actually, Christina's asked a lot. So, Christina, I'm definitely going to do a lot of your questions here. And some of them are just kind of similar. So what unions are involved in Calgary? And a follow-up, what leverage do unions use in the Calgary union member votes in terms of municipal politics?
Well, in terms of leverage, the unions, every union member has to automatically pay fees to the union. And a certain percentage of that automatically goes to the NDP party or equivalent. Okay. So if you're, this is especially true with the public sector unions. So in Calgary, Calgary's future was funded by public sector unions that run the city of Calgary.
Yeah.
But they ally themselves with the woke left, with the Trudeau alliance, I call it, right? So it's, and they don't represent the union workers. The union workers have no, they just have a good job. They just do a good job. They pay a union fee because they have no other choice. And the union bosses get to spend the money.
That's true.
And the union bosses also oftentimes will encourage, direct people, and not just directly tell people who to vote for. Let's just put it that way. They directly tell you who the good guys are and who bad guys. Some union workers listen to that. Some are smart enough not to, but they have huge power, right? So, and the longer leftists are in power, the bigger the unions get, right? So if a conservative was running the city of Calgary, you could privatize many of the things that right now union workers are doing. Road repair, road, construction, all of that stuff. If you're outside of Calgary, it all gets done by private companies. It doesn't get done by an Alberta union company. It's private, right? And we can do the same thing in Calgary. And it's just, you can be much more efficient. But the unions get exponentially bigger with the leftist in charge, right? So that's true provincially, that's true federally, and that's true, here in Calgary. So they've become very, very big, and it's going to take some time to undo the damage here in Calgary. So it starts with getting involved with our party. If you're a Calgarian, now we're going to ask people who live or work or own businesses in Calgary to get involved with our party, because you're all affected by what happens in Calgary. And we're going to have lots to do. Every one of those wards, 14 wards, we're now going to create a ward association, just like you have constituency associations. In each ward, there's going to be 30 volunteer positions. And if we're going to turn the tide, everybody who's a freedom-minded person needs to step up and be a leader.
No, I totally agree. That all makes sense to me, because it's the same idea municipally as it is that we're talking about provincial, right? So everything that we were talking about in terms of having a constituency association can be thought of as a municipal association, or whatever the term ends up being. Christine also said 15-minute city green cities are fine in places like Vancouver, where it developed over decades. But in Alberta, your eggs will freeze if you have to ride a bike or walk home from the grocery store in the winter. 2 stories, and I'm sure Roy will attest to that: bike lanes in Calgary, right? So I was an avid biker when I was in Winnipeg, but I can tell you right now, I did not ride my bike in the winter. It just did not make any sense to do that. And but they didn't officially have bike lanes. They had bike paths. And if you remember, in Calgary, we have a bike path system. And then, what was it, 10, 15 years ago, they decided to put in the bike lanes. Maybe it was even newer than that. And they basically took out one of the driving lanes downtown. And in the winter, nobody's on them because nobody's riding their bikes. So again, the idea of a green city in Vancouver or somewhere more temporal makes sense, but to do it in Calgary or Edmonton or Winnipeg, anything like that to me just doesn't make any sense. Second thing, I deal with bars and restaurants, of course, my business behind me with the games and all that. So I was dealing with a company that had their head office in Vancouver, and they were designing restaurants for Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Calgary. And so one of the very first installations I did for them, they put a jukebox, particular piece of equipment, right next to the outside door, which again, if you're anywhere in Canada and you open up a door when it's minus 30, what happens with the air? The air blasts in, and especially with the door could swing open. There's a lot of wind. You need essentially a foyer or a vestibule or something, a little area so that you open up your doors separately. They didn't know that because their mentality was everything is just like it is in Vancouver. Since then, of course, they've changed it. But that just goes to show that for things that we think are really easy construction-wise, or that we've got the experience here in Calgary, are being influenced by areas outside of our own reach, right? They could be influenced by out east. They could be influenced on the other side of the world. And when things try to be done here, they're not implemented properly. And you could argue that same thing, that we can't influence stuff that's going on in India because I've never been to India. I don't even know what happens in India. So they should be looking after their own affairs. So
it's called subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is the idea of, as much as possible, push decision-making to the lowest or most local level possible.
Yes.
Because they know what's going on, right? So it's a very different world in Calgary than it is in Winnipeg, than it is in Toronto. And decisions, I mean, right now, the blanket rezoning was designed by Ottawa, and blanket rezoning is being pushed on every city across Canada with exactly the same rules. And there's no regard for what the people of Calgary want. Yeah. It's just pushed on us, right? So it's the opposite of respecting people. And but going back to this place, this these 15-minute cities or whatever. I guess the way I look at it is I don't mind the idea of a subdivision that has mixed densities, right? A new subdivision going up in a certain new area, if it has a kind of a central district, can be really well done. Shopping area, all the stores are there, the gas stations, restaurants. Then of course you have the apartment buildings, the seniors who love to be near the grocery store, all that stuff being clustered. So if people love living in a higher density area with lots of concrete and not too many trees, they have at her, right? It makes perfect sense for a retired person to live in a condo. They don't need all that backyard stuff. They need, that's perfect for them. Yeah. But perfect for me when I'm raising a family with a dog or a cat is to have a backyard, right?
I agree.
And they have no regard for that. Everybody's supposed to be the same, and it's just not even respectful of our humanity as human beings, that we want to raise our family in a certain state with some space, a backyard, grow some plants. For me, it was really important for my kids to experience growing potatoes and peas and everything else. Yeah. I don't have any of that now. I don't need that now. I don't have my kids with me, right? So it's a different phase in life. Yeah. So these guys are anti-life, anti-human. The leftists are, and we are fighting for humanity, for our families, for our individuality, for our uniquenesses, our distinctiveness, and build a subdivision where you have choice. That's not a problem, but always respect the right for people to choose.
Yeah, no, I agree. Claire asked the question, is there a Better Edmonton party? And there should be.
Yeah, there's a party coming together, and that'll be announced very, very soon. I'm not too sure what the delay there is, but some of the same people helped us with getting a Better Calgary Party launched, are also working with the group in Edmonton. So
that's awesome.
So for sure it's coming, and gives Edmonton a fighting chance to elect a decent council.
Do you foresee this idea taking over all cities?
I'm not too sure. Like I lived in Calgary, Medicine Hat, Bow Island, so small towns, medium-sized cities, big cities. It's very different in big cities because you have 14 wards. Each has a population of about 100,000 people.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's like almost, it's the same as the city of Calgary, one ward. So it's very, very important for us to have this party system in the big cities for us to have any fighting chance. I don't think it's as necessary. There's groups like Alberta United that are trying to make sure in smaller cities, including even Cochrane, that there's good candidates aren't running against each other, right? But there's other ways of doing that without having a political party. In a big city, the only way I can think of is to have a political party, because there's so much ego in politics. You get one conservative who thinks he's the best, another conservative who thinks he's or she's the best, or whatever. There's no way either one is going to back off. Whereas the unions, they have the hammer and sickle, and they narrow it down to one. So we need a party to turn it to narrow it down to one.
Yeah, well, that's fair too. And then Christina asked again, is there a risk that water rationing will become permanent in Calgary? You know what? Anything can happen. At this point, I will not take anything off the table. They could easily say water rationing can happen. And I just mentioned that about maybe only watering on Tuesdays or whatever. Unless a group of us actually get together and say, okay, we need to vote in people that will actually represent us as residents and taxpayers and people that are just concerned about what's happening in the city. They're just going to say, well, I'm just going to fold, and this is the way that we should be going. And if we had somebody that was business minded in there and said, okay, you know what, and again, I'm going to step on some heels here. Instead of devoting art projects to every possible thing that's built in this city, we use that money to go towards infrastructure. I don't think anybody would have an issue. Or if instead of spending $300,000 on a giant circle, maybe we spend $50,000 on a giant egg. I don't know. But there has to be something, and I know it has to deal with percentage of 1% of the value of it or whatever it works out to be, but there has to be some logical rules in terms of what we're doing, because to develop those for really just like maybe one artist to profit off of that, or maybe donate to something. And that's why I'm saying I'm going to step on some heels here. But for me, it really comes down to, we've seen issues with infrastructure. We've seen issues with not only water, but roads. And, it's great that Stony Trail is now built around the city. I can get down to the south end of the city in like 20 minutes versus it used to be 45 minutes. That's the type of stuff that I want. I'm still a little concerned that every half kilometer, there seems to be a 5G tower with cameras everywhere. I'm still a little concerned about that. But I mean, that's neither here nor there or on this podcast. That's a different podcast.
Yeah, when it comes to water, there's no question that the agenda of the left includes turning our cities brown instead of green.
Yeah.
And you have to stop and think about that, because, anything west of or east of Calgary or south of Calgary, there were no trees until us terrible human beings came along and planted them and watered them, right? So there's a plus side to being able to plant trees and water them. And I have beautiful little backyard here in my subdivision, and it's tremendous amount of wildlife, rabbits and birds and coyotes and bobcats and all of that stuff in my neighborhood, right? It's only made possible by the fact, the rabbits are here because it's green, and the birds and all the rest of it. So they literally, if they have their way, all of that is gone, right? Yeah. And so again, it's not environmental friendly. It's not. Think about the joy so many people get from looking at wildlife in their backyard, right? That's all gone if Gondak and company have their way. So it's perfectly possible. If you look at where I live right now, it's medium density. It's a townhouse subdivision in Parkdale. Pretty, when I came here, there was not adequate parking from my point, but I can park one car on the street, one park on the driveway, another one in my driveway. So plenty of parking actually, but there's so much green here.
Yeah.
And when I look at the new subdivisions being built very close to where I am, there is no trees.
Wow.
They just put everything close together. It's all pavement and housing and almost no trees. And I don't know why anybody would think that's a good idea. You can have increased densification like we have in Parkdale without removing all the trees. You don't have to go extreme, right? And same with water conservation. Like there's things you can do to use less water, but based on old water consumptions of 400 liters per day per person, we have enough water licensing for the city of Calgary for 4 million people.
Oh, wow.
So when they say there's a water shortage, they're lying to us. And there's not a water shortage. There's a shortage of willingness to deliver the water. And water, when I water a lawn, it doesn't disappear. It goes into the ground. It becomes groundwater.
And that's true. You are correct.
No waste.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Well, that is interesting, and that's a very good point. I'm surprised no one's actually brought that up yet in the comments. That if you are watering, I mean, the plants are absorbing it and they're doing stuff with it, or it's
we're absorbing CO2. They're getting rid of that terrible CO2 stuff. Well,
looking at my lawn right now, it's brown, so it's not getting enough water or enough enough oxygen, I guess. Something's not right about it. So.
And it's a little bit of a heat wave, which is actually quite normal too. Every once in a while it happens.
Yeah.
But
so what is next for the what's next for you in terms of Project YYC and for a Better Calgary Party?
Well, Project YYC will become a third-party advertiser for Calgary issues, and so we have to have an entity that speaks specific to the outrageous agenda of Gondek and the Hateful Eight, and reminds people all the reasons we need to get rid of her, right? Whereas the party itself becomes the mechanism that will select good candidates, narrow down the field, and give people an opportunity to know that if you're voting for a project, for a Better Calgary candidate, you're going to have a person that's aligned with those principles, right? So basically, by the way, I should mention before we forget, next week we're going to have meet and greet events next 2 weeks for each of our wards. So that's going to be advertised on our website under events. We have 3. They're all at pubs. Great revolutions, by the way, have been started in churches and pubs.
I was going to say that. And
don't be afraid of a pub. So you don't have to drink if you're not a drinker, but we encourage everybody to order a drink or a meal. And we have 3 events next week and then 4 the following week. And so just go to our website for the detail. But if you're looking to if you're Calgarian, we need to get involved. Come to one of our events and check out the volunteer opportunities and how we're going to organize very quickly all across Calgary.
Yeah. So there you go. So you can go to a bettercalgaryparty.ca. And I just showed up. You guys do have a presence on Facebook, Instagram, and on X that I was able to find. So just literally type in a Better Calgary Party, and you will find that. Well, thanks again for coming out and having a great conversation. I always learn lots from you, Roy, and I definitely appreciate that. You have such a wealth of experience and great knowledge, and I'm wishing you much success in this party. I'm definitely going to go out and listen in on it. Again, I seem to be more focused on provincial matters. That's a big thing. Having gone through what I've gone through in the last couple of years is definitely something that I want to get involved with. But I will definitely be there to help you municipally. And who knows, maybe I could be brought in to do something with that too. So
you could be a council member, maybe.
It's
just quickly, because my initial political involvement was federal. And
yes,
I'm still quite interested in federal politics. Yeah. But I realized if we don't win the battle in Alberta, we lose Canada. So we have to win in Alberta. And the last election told me that if we lose Calgary, we lose Alberta. So
Yeah.
we have to win back.
No, you're right.
Calgary.
I agree. Yeah.
So that all of it goes together. I so appreciate everything you guys do at Alberta Prosperity Project. In the heights of COVID, I found one of your meetings at near Olds.
Yes.
And, and it was the most. It was so exciting to see.
I think you and I were at that same meeting, and
no masks, and people just no nonsense, and believing in Alberta, and believing that we need to take back our province and all the rest of it. So we really developed good friendships through those battles. I think they're lifelong friendships. Really appreciate all the work you guys are doing too.
Well, thank you. And we do this every Wednesday, every single Wednesday, except for last week was Stampede and I wasn't able to do it. And even for next week, I'm actually not going to be in the city. We're going to be doing a replay of a webinar just because I always find the replays to be so educational again, because you almost need this refresh as to, so, we show something that maybe was a year or two ago, and then you find out, oh, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Or maybe there was a slight change and maybe they've tried to do something different. So last week we had Michelle Sterling on from Friends of Science, and we were talking about a bunch of different things that kind of wrapped up into the 15-minute cities, but it was about climate change and water as well, which again, back when we actually did the interview, didn't really even factor in. And sure enough, guess what? They're talking about water. So interesting to do that. So that's what we're going to do next Wednesday while I'm away. And but yes, we do this every single Wednesday, and I hope you guys can tune in again. And you guys go out to it's only 8:15, so get out, enjoy a little bit more, a couple hours of sunshine, and we will see you guys next Wednesday. Thanks again. Thanks again, Rich. Cheers.